Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television. Today, the 7th of January 2025. Quite a number of issues are happening. Where we're saying that yesterday at noon there was an explosion about 42 kilometers to the FCT, where we're saying, according to when the report came in, just one person died, but we're saying that subsequently it seems as if about 2 people have been killed by the explosion, and then others have been rushed to the hospital. As of the time, we're saying that the police are yet to make an official statement regarding this explosion. As we're seeing that the Senate as well as reps are trying to beat up time to make sure that they pass the 2025 budget into law before the end of January. So all fingers crossed. We hope to see what will be, as today the MDAs will be defending the budget in the House of Reps. So we hope to see other issues and then hope that things will progress rightly. I am Sele Elisha Dasham. I'm doing this program together with Rachel Tanzi. Good morning.
Good morning, Sele.
All right, we have quite a number, and we will love to start with the Blueprint newspaper.
The first story on Blueprint: Makinde alleges bandits relocating to oil from Northwest. Port Harcourt: Warri refineries will boost Naira value, address FX challenges. You can find details of this business story on page 31. On sport: Home Eagles will shine a tournament and assurance from captain. This is concerning the CHAN. You can find details on page 33. The big story on the paper: Presidential Committee on Tax Reforms. We wrote 6 governors, only Ubasani and Sanwo-Olu met us. Says others have no time for us. Governors Forum invited us, cancelled appointments 4 times. A statement from Oladele. You can start with the details on the front page. 2025 budget: Senate to suspend plenary for 2 weeks on resumption. National Assembly sets January 31st as tentative date for passage. Abuja school explosion kills 2 students, injures 4. Police confirm 18 injured in Port Harcourt gas explosion. AFCC dismisses 27 officers for fraudulent activities. Police arrest 50 suspected vandals in Abuja. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Moving on to the Metric newspaper: crude oil shortage looms as NNPCL grapples with debt servicing. As well, we are seeing that Whoopi becomes the 5th African to make 50-plus appearance for 3 clubs. That is regarding the EPL. For sport lovers, you can read that story on page 22. State of Nation address: My life on the thread. Whoopi cries out, with the writer saying hold Nigerian government responsible if anything happens to him, coming from the Obedient movement. You can do well to read more detail of what actually happened on page 3. And then regarding FCT, where we're seeing that Wike arrested manhole cover vandals with faithful rod of law. I take that again: arrested manhole cover vandals will face the full rod of the law regarding vandalism in FCT. Detail found on page 3. The big story on the paper: Senate reps in race against time to pass 2025 budget. The writer say both chambers have set January 31st as the deadline to pass the budget. Senate urges lawmakers to step up effort despite limited time. Reps to commence defense by MDAs today. Detail found on page 2. EFCC sacked 27 officers over fraud and misconduct. Canadian Prime Minister Justin to resign after 9 years in office. Tinubu arrived Ghana for Mahama's inauguration ceremony. Detail found on page 9. And then here as well, we're seeing there's a story on entertainment. You can do well to read more detail of that. And we're seeing a picture story, a courtesy visit where we can see the president receive Honorable Minister Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke, at his residence in Abuja. This happened yesterday. More detail found in the paper, and that's all the Metric newspaper.
On Voice of Liberty: bomb explosion rocks Abuja school, student feared dead. Police confirm 18 injured in gas explosion. This is in Rivers State. Shehu Sani funds disposed Etsu Nupe Palace renovation in Lokoja. The big story on the paper: controversy over local government's fiscal autonomy lingers as Tinubu AGF governors clash over implementation. The debate over the fiscal autonomy of Nigeria's 774 local governments continues despite last year's Supreme Court ruling affirming their independence. Niger government warns farmers of bomb threats. EFCC sacks 27 officers for fraudulent activities and misconduct. Southern Kaduna journalists commend Tinubu for approving Federal Medical Center. The rat story on the paper: NNPCL illegally deducted 426 billion naira under Buhari's watch as petroleum minister. This is a report, and that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
On the Daily Times newspaper, looking at economy, Tinubu right to ignore IMF World Bank recommendation coming from Senator Kadu, where we're seeing that Senator Uji Uzo Kadu has commended President Tinubu's administration for ignoring recommendation of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund institution for running his economic policies. More detail regarding that can be found in the paper. The big story: EFCC dismisses 27 officers for fraudulent activities and misconduct. As well, still on the paper, 10 months after Saudi acquit 3 Nigerian over drug charges. We saw that yesterday on some of our papers. Oil marketers predict drop below, and then we have NDLEA arrest drug kingpin Nollywood filmmaker. Governor Mutfwan set to recover government asset inaugurate recovery panel. You can read detail of that in the paper. And as well, the last story is still regarding the explosion that took place yesterday in FCT, and that's all in Daily Times newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, 3 million barrel per day target, 49.7 trillion naira budget rests on new FIDs, secure oil assets. And then we have an infographic backing the big story where we can see 2025 budget key assumptions. Oil production at 2.06 million barrel per day, exchange rate at 1,500 naira to a dollar, inflation at 15%. And also 2024 oil production data, where we can see in January we have a production of 1.42 million barrel per day, in February 1.32 million barrel per day, in March we have 1.23, the following month of April 1.28, in May 1.25, June 1.276, in July 1.307, in August 1.4 million barrel per day, September 1.32 million barrel per day, in October 1.53 million barrel per day, and then November 1.7 million barrel per day. So we had the highest in the last quarter of the year, October and November. Still yet there was no month where we were able to reach 2 million barrels per day. And we saw more oil exploration, more oil wells openings and all of that. And still yet we have the government assuming and hoping that we reach the target of 2.06 million barrel per day for us to be able to finance the 49.7 trillion naira budget. And also an inflation of 15%. We have an inflation that is almost over 30% at the moment now. And then this is going to be a major achievement if we can see an economy where inflation rate is down 15%. I'm looking forward to seeing if the Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration really know what they're doing with this forecast, and if they can pull this off, especially when it comes to inflation. Still on the Guardian newspaper, 80 bandits killed in Katsina as hoodlums levy Zamfara communities. NDA's defense spending as National Assembly eyes January ending for budget approval. Culprits of Ibadan stampede must face trial, Makinde vows. On local government, court orders of Pebelo House to maintain status quo. Have I really crossed the line? Obi queries alleged threat to life. On Lassa fever, NCDC experts raise alarm, advocate prevention and early treatment. Medical lab scientists in limbo over AAU, MISCN quota raw. You can find details on page 4, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
And on this day newspaper, appropriation bill, Senate to suspend plenary for 2 weeks. where we have the National Assembly tentatively fixed January 31st for the passage of proposed budget. So when they resume office on the 14th, hopefully by Tuesday they should start working regarding the implementation of the budget. And then still on this day, we have this day Lifetime Achievement Award finalized by Board of Editors. The writer here unveiled nominees for Game Changers category, announces the Tigress Nigerian female basketball team, Sport Personality of the Year, nominees of CEOs of the Year also emerged. So we can see some of the winners, the Lifetime Achievement Award, and then as well the CEOs of the Year, and then nominees of the Game Changers of the Year, among which we can see the Governor of Lagos State, we can see Nuhu Ribadu, we can see Wale Edu, we can see Peter Mbad, the Governor of Enugu State, as well as Dapo Abiodun. We're also seeing that. So you can do well to get the paper, read more detail of those who actually got the award and other stories that quite of interest to you in the paper.
On Nigerian Tribune, the big story, New Year message, my life under threat, Obi alleges. You can find details on page 15. Ibadan Stampede, justice must be done, Makinde's insistencies, ex-Queen Naomi, Hamzat principal will face trial. ISWAP raids Borno military base, 6 soldiers feared killed. You can find details on page 2. Court orders Opebelu Edo Assembly to maintain status quo, another 2 council chairmen impeached. 2024 UTME, JAMB remits 6 billion naira to federal government coffers, contributes over 50 billion naira to national treasury in 7 years. You can find details of this report on page 8. Obasanjo, Abiodun, Daniel Omosun, Adebutu, others mourn as Cash Madam Adio Senri dies at 89. Army uncovers 20 illegal refineries, arrests 11 operators in 4 states. On tax reforms bills, Governors Forum Council meeting 4 times, Oyedele is saying. EFCC dismisses 27 officers for fraudulent activities, misconduct. KPMG Banking Industry Survey, UBA emerges top 5 in customer experience. And then we have a picture story showing students resuming after the New Year holiday in Ibadan or your state yesterday. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the leadership newspaper, no conflict between Emir of Ilori, Kwara governor is saying, and this is regarding what's happening in the palace. You can do well to read the detail of that on page 12. And on budget defense, reps read riot act to ministers and others. You can read detail of that on page 16. Trending, passengers from China to screen for respiratory virus. And on numbers, Nigerians unrealized export potential put at $3 billion. Both numbers and trending can be found on page 2. Onion farmers blame price hikes, scarcity on flood and climate change. We saw that yesterday, and no wonder you can see that it's very hard for you to get onion very cheap. On onion for about 1,000 naira, Richard, is I think about 4 or 3 depending on where you're actually buying it. So we can see, for those who are wondering what actually cost that, we're saying according to the farmers, it's as a result of the flood and climate change. I hope that the government will do something so that this year, regardless of what the climate change will be, there should be a way of protecting all of these things, so that when the time for us to get it is actually by the corner, will not have issues such as this. So you can see that that is the reason why the onion is quite high. Still on the leadership newspaper, Wiki vows to prosecute vandals for manhole cover theft. Still on the paper, we have Canadian Prime Minister announces plan to resign. Sokoto SSG loses daughter, 3 grandchildren to inferior. That's quite a sad one. Detail found in the paper. 2 killed, 2 injured in Abuja school explosion. And we have TEF opens applications for 2025. The big story on the paper, growing concern over quality of private schools. With the writer here saying proprietors compromise standard, use cheap labor. Stakeholders blame poor funding of public schools. And then we have a report coming from the NSSEC saying 80% of secondary schools privately owned. More detail found on page 4. We have cross-section of pictures of schools that have resumed as of yesterday. We have Lagos, Ibadan, Abuja, and Kaduna among the schools that have resumed. And that's all on the leadership newspaper.
On Daily Independent, Ibadan Stampede, Queen Naomi, others must be persecuted, Makinde is insisting. Bode judge condemns move to hand over King's College to old students. You can start with the details on the front page. The big story on Daily Independent, LG chairman suspension, court orders Edo Governor Assembly to maintain status quo. Sokoto's SSG's daughter, 3 grandchildren die in fire accident. Police recover FCT's 25 stolen manhole covers from Abuja steel koi. The writer says Wike directs replacement of stolen manhole covers. You can find details on page 29. EFCC sacks 27 officers over fraudulent activities and misconduct. GTCO announces completion of 209.41 billion naira first phase capital raise. Lagos Assembly passes 3.4 trillion naira 2025 budget. We have 49.7 trillion naira 2025 budget. Senate to suspend sitting after January 14 resumption. Still on the paper, we have a story on cult groups clash. Aiyedatiwa imposes curfew on Owo after death of 8 persons. Canada's Prime Minister announces resignation as the Prime Minister. You can find details on page 6. And that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
Moving on now to New Telegraph newspaper, portfolio investors return boost capital inflows by 190% to $9.12 billion. Data outage concern mount over inaccessibility of MBS website. Still on the paper, we have Senate reps begin 49.7 trillion naira budget defense today. You can read detail of that on page 2 and 4. Obi alleges threat to life over criticism of federal government. This was regarding his New Year speech about the state of the economy as well as insecurity in the country. 1 dies, 3 injured as explosion rocks Abuja school. And we still have the international story where we are seeing the Canada Prime Minister Justin to resign. Detail found on page 6. The big story regarding banditry, Niger governor issue bomb alert urges farmers to stay away from farms to avoid IEDs planted by bandits, says military must clear suspended mine-laden areas before locals can move safely. So for those who are in Niger State, please do adhere to this warning. Army uncovers 20 illegal refineries, arrests 11 operators in 4 states. Lagos Assembly passes 3.4 trillion naira 2025 budget. As well, we see alleged fraud. EFCC dismisses 27 officers. Senator Kalu is saying Tinubu's right to have ignored IMF and World Bank recommendations, says we must use homegrown policies to solve our economic problems. Airtel Nigeria backs call for tariff increase. For those who are Airtel subscribers, please do well to listen and as well read what this is all about. We have a study that says how family planning prevents stunted growth. So you need to read that on page 30. And that's all the New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, federal government revised bid to float national carrier. Makinde insists on prosecution of Oyini's ex-wife Hamzat and others. EFCC sacks 27 operatives for fraud and misconduct. Socialite Bisolola Edunsori, aka Cash Madam, dies at 89. Court orders of Pebelo Assembly orders to maintain status quo on Edo councils. You can find details on page 28. The big story on the paper, Senate House begin work on 49.7 trillion naira 2025 budget estimates. The writer says MDA takes turn to defend allocation before National Assembly committees. And you can start with the details on the front page. And then we also have the timeline here, whereby December 18, 2024, the bill laid before the National Assembly. On the 19th of December, bill passed second reading. January 6th, inaugural meeting of Appropriation Committee. And then January 7, MDAs begin budget defense. And then January 9 will be the budget retreat. Troops ISWAP in bloody Borno battle. China virus, NCDC reactivates COVID-19 protocol. Screening of incoming passengers at borders begins. No cause for alarm yet. However, if the NCDC is reactivating COVID-19 protocols, I believe it's for everyone and everywhere, where we will be schools, hospitals, where there's a lot of contact and all of that, even in offices where you exchange handshakes, you converse, close contact with people and all of that. So it's important. It's just a proactive measure. Even if there's no alarm, it's important that this protocol is not only at the airport or the borders, but anywhere that we have contact with one another. We can start with the details on the front page. Canadian PM quits. We have Sarkozy on trial for Gaddafi case. Harris-led Senate certifies Trump. These are all international stories you can find on page 3 and 2. Ghana's new president, John Mahama, and his offer Kwara State connection. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. After NERC approval, Aba Power hikes electricity tariff by 120%. Suspension of local government chairman, court orders Okpebholo Edo Assembly to maintain status quo. EFCC fires 27 officers over alleged corruption. As well, we have Igbo tanker explosion, where we see I saw my wife on the ground burning coming from discarded husband. The big story on the paper, thousands face life-threatening ailment from lead poisoning. Varsity dons, medical practitioners and farmers raise concern. The government flags federal government for poor supervision of miners. Lament miners fail to implement agreement with communities to provide amenities. More detail found in the paper. 2 killed, 2 others injured as explosion rocks school in Abuja. Sokoto SSG lost daughter, 3 grandchildren, house help to fire. Peter Obi saying, I have received threat messages. Obedience raised the alarm over APC's threat to Obi's life and businesses. APC absolved spokesman. More detail found on page 5. After we still have on the paper, APC chieftain, mother, child, 2 others shot dead in Ondo called war. Court grant 100 million naira bail to lady detained for threatening Tinubu's son and the IGP. And on sport, Osimhen is highest rated player in Turkish Super Lig. We have the picture story where we can see the president with the chief of staff to the president of Ghana, Julius, when the president arrived at the international airport, Accra, Ghana, yesterday to attend the inauguration of the president-elect. So you can do well to get more paper, and that's how far we can go on the program, the Dailies today. Thank you so much for keeping the date with us. We look forward again to doing this together tomorrow. So do have a lovely day ahead.